Hey everybody, how's it going? Hope you're all having a good morning. I just wanted to pop into stream real quick to talk about something that I've actually been wanting to make a video on about Elden Ring for a while. So I figured I'd just come into the stream and I'll clip it into a video later. But I was actually talking to a guy on the Elden Ring Facebook group today about some of the struggles that he was having playing the game with a keyboard and mouse on PC. And I hear a lot of veteran Souls players talking all the time about how the games were designed to be played on controller and that it's more difficult to play on keyboard and mouse. And I can kind of understand people's struggles a little bit in the beginning with Elden Ring, and that setting up the keybinds is not exactly 100% straightforward. But I think that I found a pretty comfortable setup for the keybinds in the game that I like to use. And so I figured I'd come on here and just kind of share the keybinds and the settings that I like to use in hopes that if there's people out there that want to play on keyboard and mouse or don't have a controller that they can play on, then they can maybe use these keybinds or take the ones that I have and tweak them slightly to make them more comfortable for their own personal setup. And essentially when I was designing these keybind layouts, I was going off of the keybinds that I commonly use for MMORPGs, just because I'm familiar with that type of layout for keybinds, but I also just found that it made the gameplay feel really natural for me to set it up in that way, and I didn't really struggle with using the keyboard and mouse. And so I think being able to show other people how to do the same thing is going to be really beneficial. So real quick, we're going to take a look over here at the game. There is one thing that I want to go over real quick before we actually get into the keybinds. So when you first load up the PC version of Elden Ring, and I don't know if this has changed thus far, but when I first started the game, one of the kind of frustrating things that you're going to notice, or that may be confusing, is that they're going to give you the prompts for the controllers, for the on-screen prompts. So when you're going through the tutorial in the game on your PC, it can be very confusing to try to figure out, what button do I press for what when you're seeing completely different controls on the screen. So the first thing that you want to do when you come into the game, and you can do this from the main menu here, or you can do it from the in-game menu as well, but we're going to come down here to System, and then we're going to look under the sound and display options right here. And you're going to see, it's kind of weird that it's hidden in this area, but you're going to see a spot right here, device for on-screen prompts, and you just want to change that to keyboard and mouse, and that will now make it so that when you go through the game, anytime they prompt you with anything that shows the key press, it will now show you the correct key bindings for it, or at least what the default key bindings will be when you load up the game. So now let's go ahead and load up the game, and I'm actually going to show you guys exactly what we got. And actually real quick too, so before we get into talking about the actual keybinds as well, it'll be worthy to mention, so I'm not going to put up an actual graphic. I'm going to assume that most people will have a keyboard in front of them, or at least familiar with the layout of the keyboard, but one thing that might be slightly different for people is the actual mouse that they're going to be using. So real quick here, if I bring my mouse over, I don't know how well you'll be able to see on camera, but essentially with the way this mouse works, I have the two regular click buttons on the top, and then on the side here I have two customizable clickable buttons on the side here as well. And you can do this too, like I know some mouses will have panels with multiple buttons on the side, but for the layout that we're working with, as long as you have two buttons on the side of your mouse, you'll be able to make this work. If you don't have buttons on the side of your mouse, you will be able to still make this keybind setup work. You're just going to have to tweak a couple of the things for yourself. Alright, so getting right into it, I basically left the movement controls the default in the game, WASD. There was really no reason to change that. In terms of, I guess we'll start with actual combat actions, or at least on the mouse. So I left the default, left click is your normal light attack. Then you have your right click for power stancing, or for your secondary weapon. Then what I did was for heavy attacks, I put them on the front of the two side buttons on the mouse. So the one that is going to be closer to the tip of my thumb. And that basically makes it so that all of my combat actions, all of my different attacks are going to be all controlled from the same area of the mouse, either a left click, a right click, or the front side button, which makes the combat just flow very naturally. So then moving over to some of the keyboard actions for jumping. So I see that at least if I remember correctly, the default jump is F. And the guy that I was talking to on Facebook today was saying that one of the things he was struggling with was incorporating more jumping into his gameplay, which I could see if it is bound to F can be an issue, because then you're moving your hands away from using WASD when you're in movement. So that's not really conducive to trying to jump while you're moving around. So what I did is I have my jump bound to spacebar, which is just very easy. I can hit it with my thumb while I'm moving around, and it doesn't really affect any of my other movement controls. C, I have set to crouch. That just kind of makes sense. It's in a good spot for it. Then to use special skills, so basically all of the main keybinds I'm going to have kind of centered around the WASD so that they're all very easy to reach and that I'm not overextending my left hand too much. And if you're actually looking at the layout of the keyboard, you'll see that they're going to kind of circle around the WASD. So moving up from C, if we look at F, F is going to be our skills button. So that's going to be like for our Ashes of War. So I have Bloodhound Step on right now. Did not mean to use my physic there, but you'll see if I hit F, Bloodhound Step, so I'm using my special ability on my weapons. Now, getting to why I did just use my physics, so if we move up, R is going to be the use item. So I just fat fingered that a little bit, but essentially, you know, if we want to use any of our flasks, or any of the items that we have down in the item button, we're going to have that on R. Then moving over, E is going to be our event action button. So if I want to go into this mist right here, if I want to read any of these messages, interact with anything in the world, for that we're going to be using E. E is also, while we're on the topic of E, is how we're going to be opening our pouch as well. So when E is held, you'll notice if we look down at the left over here, where we have the weapons and the Estus flask, when I hit E, it's now going to change that display, and we're going to have the 4 options for our flasks as well. I mean, for the pouch items. Then for targeting, we're going to be using Q. I just found that that was a really easy spot to have it in so that I can target and detarget very easily in combat. It doesn't really affect my movement too much. In MMOs where there's tab targeting, such as World of Warcraft, I used to have it either on like the tab or the caps lock. So it's kind of just having it on the Q is kind of just in a very native spot for me. Okay, so then let me see real quick for our items. So I could see basically the items, weapon swapping, and the pouch items being the most difficult part of the key binding process here. So essentially the way I have set it up, I have it on 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if I'm not holding E and I'm not trying to access my pouch, 1 is going to be to switch between whichever item that I currently have active. So any of my flasks, my Wondrous Physic. 2 is going to be to switch my active spell, which at the moment on this character I'm not using any spells, so you can see there's nothing there. But if I had active spell slots on this character, that would be cycling through whichever active spell that I'm currently using. Hey Grace Hobb, thanks for hopping in. Okay, so having those things bound to 1, 2, 3, and 4 also gives us the option that now when we hit E, we can use 1, 2, 3, and 4 to access our pouch items as well. So I personally have my ring for Torrent in 1, which obviously I cannot ride Torrent here. 2 is going to be my lantern. And then 3 and 4 I generally use for spirit summoning ashes, even though I don't generally use ashes that often. I also have a prattling pate on this character that I can use for some instances in multiplayer. But to me, that was the most intuitive way to set up the pouch, because in other games, like I said, I'm mapping it after MMO layouts. So in a lot of MMOs, I have like spells and active buttons along 1, 2, 3, and 4. And those are very easy to activate, you know, while I'm moving around, while I'm doing other things. It's not too much of a hindrance. And like I said, I'm not overextending my left hand as I'm trying to access those things. It may take a little bit of getting used to, you know, cycling between those things there. But I promise once you get used to having it that way, it's going to be a lot easier. And then 3 and 4 are going to control our weapons as well. So 3 is swapping our primary weapon. I don't have any other weapons equipped in my main hand, but that will swap that. And 4 will be swapping our offhand weapon. Now the last thing I want to talk about, it's a little bit interesting, probably the most important part of the key binding layout that I'm talking about here, or at least the part that I think is going to be most impactful for people, and that is how I've bound my dodge and sprint button. So the way I've done it is I've actually double bound my dodge. And what I mean by that, so I've set 2 different keybinds that will both activate the dodge and sprint together. One of them I have on the keyboard as shift. And generally I use shift for sprinting only. And I'll use it just when I'm kind of navigating the world as I am right now. I'm not really expecting too much to be going on. I'm kind of just going forward. And it's very easy for me to kind of activate it in that manner. But I also have it bound to that other button on the side of my mouse as well, the one that's a little bit set further back. And that's the one that I use predominantly for dodging, so I always dodge from the mouse. And to me, having it on the mouse right where my thumb is just makes it super reactive. As soon as an attack comes in, boom, I could just hit the dodge and I'm ready to go. In some combat situations, if my left hand is too tied up or I'm trying to do other things, I will actually use the mouse button to activate the sprint as well. But that's kind of interchangeable. I'll either use shift or the mouse to sprint depending on what situation I'm in. Now, the one little disclaimer that I have about double binding your dodge button like that and your sprint is that you can get into a situation where you may not realize that you're trying to activate both of them at the same time, and it's not going to work. And what I mean by that is, let's say that I'm running right now and I'm holding sprint, right? So I have my character running, and let's say that I know that somebody is going to be jumping out at me somewhere here, so I'm going to be going for like a quick dodge in response. I can't hit the dodge button on my mouse right now and dodge because I'm holding down shift to sprint. So in order for me to do that, I have to make sure in my mind, okay, I'm letting go of shift before I hit that button to dodge. That's probably the only tricky part about this double binding situation, and something that might trip people up in the beginning. Honestly, it wasn't too much of a problem for me. Like I said, it kind of just felt natural for me off the beginning. But that is something that you want to be aware of, is that you cannot be using both of the keybinds, so you can't be like sprinting straight into a dodge or anything like that. But yeah, I just think having them double bound like that, especially having the dodge button on the mouse like that, just makes it super responsive, super easy to dodge. Now let me just double check here real quick. I think I covered pretty much all of the bindings, but I just want to look at the menu here, and this will just be a good reference too if you're setting them up for yourself, so you can kind of see. And I'll just briefly go over again. So our movements, W, A, S, and D. Here is the dodge, roll, dash, which you can see I've double bound. So I have it on the shift and I have it on mouse button 4, which is my side mouse button. Jump at space, crouch at C. Q for our target lock on. And this is where we're going to set up the 1, 2, 3, and 4 thing. So if you have a different preference as to which of these keys is going to change different things, like let's say you prefer that 1 and 2 are going to swap your weapons, you can switch, right hand and left hand armament to 1 and 2, and you can make your sorcery switch and your item switch to 3 and 4. So this you can kind of set up, or if you wanted them on slightly different buttons somewhere near your hand, you can go with those ones as well. And keep in mind too that as you set these are also going to be controlling your pouch buttons as well. And then if we come down to here, we can see that basically all of our attack items, or all of our attack keybinds, are going to be on the mouse. I did forget to mention that right click we have blocking as well if you're using a shield. But you can see, so we have left click for regular attack, strong attack is on the side mouse button, guarding or left hand armament is on the right click, and then we have skill on F, use item on R, and event action on E. So I hope that for any of the PC players that are out there that don't have controllers or that are just set on using your keyboard and mouse, I hope that seeing these controls will help you out. Maybe you can just use them exactly the way I have set up and it'll be perfectly comfortable for you. Or you, like I said, if you can kind of tweak them a little bit and make it work for you. But I hope that this kind of helps people out, makes things feel a little bit more comfortable, because I think keyboard and mouse is a perfectly viable way to play Elden Ring. I don't think there's any reason that people should feel like it's a hindrance to them or that it's holding them back in any way. So I hope it helped you guys out. Just a quick reminder too, so I do have 2 other streams planned for this week. We're going to be playing a little bit more Elden Ring. We're going to be doing some more co-op kills of Melania like we were doing last week, and I do plan to finish the Ronnie quest line, so we're going to do part 2 of that in New Game Plus. And then I do also have a special stream planned with a friend of mine where we're going to be hopping into New World to see what the state of the game is. It's been about 2 months since either of us have really logged into the game or played. There's been some major updates since then, so we kind of want to see what the state of the game is and how everything's going. So once I have a day set in stone for that, I'll put it up on the stream schedule, but just keep your eyes out for that stuff. We got some content coming this week. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I really appreciate it. I'll have this video up on YouTube for reference, and I hope you guys have a great day. Take it easy.